the Diocese of Grand Island in Nebraska. The story of the faith in this region began with the labors of Jesuit missionaries, was sustained and nurtured over the years by faithful bishops, and is still being written today under the leadership of its current apostle, Bishop Gerard Hanefeldt.
The fact is that each of us is precious and unique and gifted and graced. Every single one of us is a never to be repeated wonder in all of God's creation. There'll never be another one of us, and God knew what he was doing when he created us, and we have to trust that.
This is the story of the bishops of America, the shepherds of the past and the shepherds of today, who through their callings and ministry carry the church into the future. It's also the story of their parish, their church, the Cathedral. This is The Chair, an exploration of what it means to be an apostle in America.
In central Nebraska, on the northeast banks of the Platte River, is the Diocese of Grand Island, a Catholic community with a deep faith and rich culture, which encompasses an area of over 42,000 square miles.
The state of Nebraska, it is geographically, it's huge, it's diverse. Challenge in many ways is trying to make a sense of unity in our diocese.
The Catholic faith was first planted in the rich soil of Nebraska in the early half of the 19th century. And this was done by the intrepid Jesuit missionary priest, Father Jean-Pierre de Smet. And de Smet traveled some 100,000 miles in the course of his lifetime, spreading the faith among various Native American tribes, and he actually advocated for them before the U.S. government.
It's believed that the first Catholic Mass celebrated in the Nebraska Territory after it was established took place in what is now the Diocese of Grand Island near Scottsbluff. And it was there that Father de Smet, a Jesuit missionary priest from Belgium, celebrated Mass as part of his travels throughout the Nebraska, Wyoming, and Montana territories in his work to minister to the Native American populations. Father de Smet came to the United States in his early 20s and was educated in seminaries in Maryland and St. Louis, where he not only studied for the priesthood, but he also took it upon himself to study Native American languages so that he could minister more effectively to the Native American population. And he developed a deep respect for them and they of him. And so when there were tensions between Catholic settlers and Native American tribes, he was often called in to function as an intermediary and peacemaker.
While the work of the church in the early half of the 1800s was focused mainly on Native American ministry, in 1857, German settlers came into the region, and they built a new settlement on an island formed by the Wood River and the Platte River. A little over 10 years later, when surveyors from the Union Pacific Railroad laid out a town slightly inland from the island called Grand Island Station, many of these same settlers moved to the new town, and they brought with them their Catholic faith.
In 1868, the Union Pacific Railway reaches central Nebraska, bringing with it opportunities and jobs for immigrants. And many of the German and Irish Catholic immigrants move to the area because they are looking for work. So this offers an opportunity for them financially, socioeconomically, but also their spiritual needs need to be met. There are very, very few Catholics prior to the railroad coming. There are now a few more, but the population is rather sparse.
The first bishop of Omaha remarked how the Catholic population was scattered and isolated in pockets and islands throughout the western portion of the state. And he was quite honest about the difficult conditions that were present as he was trying to recruit clergy to work among the Catholic population, despite the news of blizzards and dust storms and tensions with Native American tribes that made it very difficult for the Catholic population to establish a strong presence in western Nebraska. The Union Pacific Railroad donated land in the city of Grand Island for the establishment of a Catholic church in the 1870s. Recognizing the value that building up religious infrastructure would have to the local community. The railroad companies also joined church leaders in recruiting women religious to serve as nurses in railroad camps. And those efforts of women religious became the foundation for many of the Catholic hospitals throughout the Great Plains.
As the Catholic population in the Grand Island region increased, it became clear that a new diocese was needed for western Nebraska. Now, this was established in 1912, and it was originally founded as the Diocese of Kearney. 4 years later, the Episcopal See was moved to the city of Grand Island, where it has been ever since.
The first bishop of the diocese was James Duffy, who was originally from Minnesota, one of 8 children whose parents died tragically when they were young, and the entire clan was sent to an orphanage to live. It's very likely that in this orphanage, Father Duffy begins to discern a vocation to the priesthood, most likely seeing the care that was given to him and his siblings by these religious orders, whether they were male and or female orders. He really begins to sort of understand what it means to walk with others, to care for others, to nurture them not just physically, but spiritually and emotionally as well. Bishop Duffy serves as a priest in his native diocese of St. Paul, Minnesota, and eventually is then called as the Bishop of Kearney. As newly consecrated bishop, he sets his mind to building a cathedral worthy of the people of Grand Island, a grand cathedral, if you will. I could just see him looking over architectural drawings or working with them, but he takes us a step farther and goes to France and studies some of the great Gothic cathedrals, probably Notre Dame, Saint-Denis. And it's believed that this cathedral was modeled after the Chapel of Sainte-Chapelle in Paris.
The cathedral itself started in 1926, dedicated in 1928, and it is kind of a Gothic style, which I absolutely love. I was impressed when I came out here for the first time that we have a cathedral like this. It's kind of a landmark. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. Its size and its design harkens to a different era in the church, which I think connects the contemporary time with our history as a church and as a people.
In 1926 to 28, the cathedral was being constructed, and people began to criticize the bishop and say that this is just too big of a cathedral for the needs and the number of people who were in the diocese at that time. However, today, every Sunday, about 3,000 people come in and out for Sunday Mass, and the size of the cathedral was really actually warranted in the end.
Mass attendance here, I think there's 4 English Masses, 2 Spanish Masses on a weekend, and it's become more or less the Spanish-speaking parish in the community. The cathedral, it's a cultural diversity microcosm.
As you walk into the cathedral, the nave is lined by bundled columns. A bundled column is, as it sounds, several columns, thinner columns bundled into one, and they reach up, and then splay into fan vaults, which really makes it look like there's an arbor hovering over, kind of like trees hovering over the nave. That's a very typical feature of Gothic art.
I like to actually stand behind this altar and look at that window. And that window above the choir loft faces, from here we face east, and the morning light, and it's our Blessed Mother, Madonna and Child with saints and angels around it. So the color is gorgeous. It's so inspiring. I really like my position from behind the altar when I can celebrate Mass, looking at the glory of God coming through stained glass windows. It centers you. It's very symmetrical as Gothic is, and the design, but it all centers on the central figure. All things with God are harmonious, and I think that's why I like it the most.
In the sanctuary of this cathedral, we see a beautiful white marble baldacchino, and at the tops of the columns of the baldacchino, we see images of the 4 evangelists. So the column capitals are actually the animals that are associated with the evangelists. So we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John who stand atop these column capitals. There's statues of them, and then beneath them there's one of the 4 living creatures that represents them holding a little banner, and their name is inscribed in gold on that banner. So those are the column capitals of the baldacchino. And next to the baldacchino we see the cathedral, which is very important to any cathedral.
But it's kind of simple, but it's symbolic, and I think that's what's so powerful about the bishop's chair. It symbolizes the authority of Christ, but also the shepherd. And that idea of having a symbol to remind us of Christ, and then who sits in that chair, very humbling to assume and carry that responsibility. I think this is what is so significant about the chair, is it symbolizes someone's leading us. And it's Christ who leads us, but Christ delegates that to somebody in every age. More than just a symbol, because of what it symbolizes, I think it inspires and encourages.
The cathedra, or chair of the Cathedral of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, represents Bishop Hanefeldt's authority as the Apostle of Grand Island.
I'm the second of 4. My sister's the oldest, and then I'm the oldest of the 3 boys, and they all live up in Knox County where our farm is, except for myself. So I grew up on a farm here in northeast Nebraska. It's in the Archdiocese of Omaha. It's about 800 acres. Half of it's about farmable. I always joked it would make a better state park than a farm because it's high rolling hills and streams, and it's a beautiful part of Nebraska. You gotta have faith to farm, I'll put it that way. And if you're going to be a farmer, you have to rely on the Lord. It really, I think, taught me how to trust God from a very early age, just because of the elements, just because of the climate, and you don't know what's going to be, and you don't have to, you just have to trust. So faith for me really grew out of my farm background. It wasn't not necessarily expected that you would take over the farm, but also my father said, you know, we have poor land and old machinery, and you need to think about what are you going to do. And I think it was probably junior high, middle school, where I started saying to myself, I want to do something to make the world a better place, but it probably isn't going to be here. What happened, I think, maybe along my vocations storyline was, though, I was a freshman when Roe versus Wade happened. And as a freshman, I could not believe that they had legalized abortion in this country. And I said to myself, I've got to do something to make the world a better place. But I was thinking in terms of government, politics, probably getting a degree in political science, doing something along the lines of changing the laws. So a lady in my parish said to me, have you thought about being a priest? And I said, no, I was a cantor at Mass. I love to sing. Doing something to make the world a better place was there, but I never thought about it in terms of priesthood. And it's when I walked into that college seminary, St. John Vianney Seminary on the campus of the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. There was a room for 140 guys my age, all thinking about seminary. It hit me. That's where the peace came. It was absolutely clear, this is what I'm supposed to do. I just knew very deeply, all that praying, God doesn't tell us when we want to know things, He tells us when we need to know things. And it was perfectly clear, and I've never looked back since. I finished college in 1980, and then I was invited by the Archbishop to go to study at the Pontifical North American College in Rome. I was ordained a deacon with my class at the Basilica of St. Peter in the Vatican in 1983, and priesthood in 1984. My dad was an only child. He never had anybody to talk to growing up. So he was a quieter guy when it come to interior stuff. We had a party out at the farm that night, and my dad had a little polka trio, but you know, when he closed that down for the night, he had the microphone, he did a little talk. And I happened to be coming out of the house, and I heard my dad, and he was saying how proud he was of me and how much this meant to him. And that has stayed with me at different times, even as I was doing his funeral 21 years ago already. My dad wasn't the kind of guy who would say, I love you, you know, and it wasn't like a hug or something like that. You knew Dad loved you by the way he treated you. And so it meant a lot to me, it really did. My first assignment was St. Mary's in West Point, which is about 80 miles northwest of Omaha, Catholic high school, a very Catholic community. So they have a Catholic hospital, Catholic nursing home, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school. It's a Catholic campus. And it was a wonderful place to just, you might say, get my feet wet with all kinds of things. High school kids, grade school kids, the whole birth to death range. It was a wonderful place.
After serving in the Archdiocese of Omaha for a number of years as a pastor, director of pro-life activities, and spiritual director to seminarians, Father Hanefeldt was named the next bishop of the Diocese of Grand Island in 2015.
Yeah, it was a Saturday. This Friday will actually be 5 years ago. It was the weekend of the fourth Sunday of Advent. I was doing spiritual direction for a prospective seminarian, and that finished about 10 o'clock, and I was going to sit down to write my homily, and next to my PC is the phone. The phone's red light was blinking, and we were near a big hospital in Omaha. We had to cover the hospital, so I thought there was a hospital emergency. And so I thought, well, before I try and write this homily, I better check the phone. And I checked, and it was not the hospital. It was a man with an Italian accent calling from the nunciature in Washington saying that if I would call this number. He didn't say his name. I assumed I knew who it was based on his accent and where he was calling from. And I was like, oh my gosh, why would they be calling me? They'd only be calling me if this is news about being a bishop. I'm not answering that, at least not now. I sat down to try and I couldn't write my homily. I couldn't think. I'm like, this is just so preoccupied. So I went over to the Blessed Sacrament Chapel for 20 minutes to half an hour to pray and ask the Lord for the grace to handle whatever this is, especially because if this is what I thought it was going to be. So then I came back and sure enough, I got a hold of him and he said, the Holy Father's name you Bishop of Grand Island. And of course, they always want an answer on the spot right away. They do a good job of identifying, are you the person I'm speaking to, the person I think I'm speaking to, so that they make sure they say this to the right person. So then I was like, yeah, I said, I've always tried to do what the church wants to do, and if this is what the church is asking me, then yeah. As far as the ceremony goes, music, everything, and I felt like I just walked in and let it be done unto me. I was blown away at the beauty of how this local church celebrated that. And this was the buzz, I will call it, among a lot of people from outside this diocese. What an amazing celebration it was liturgically. I received the ring and the mitre and the crozier, and I took possession of the chair and turned around and sat down in it and looked at everyone. I was like, I don't know if I've ever celebrated a Mass before. I felt like it was day one. And I know how to say, I've been saying Mass for 30 years, but it was this kind of sense of being led by the hand. Lord, lead me through this. And friends of mine would ask me, we know what you did as a priest. What do you do as a bishop? And I said, well, in many ways, I think my role is to father the fathers, to shepherd and lead the priests. And in that regard, I used some of the same skills of spiritual direction that I did with seminarians in formation to use some of those same kind of skills with priests when it comes to questions, concerns, problems, uncertainties, challenges that they face. I use some of those same skills to sit down with them and process what the thing is that they're bringing forward.
In the years since becoming bishop, Bishop Hanefeldt has strived to shepherd his people as a true apostle. At the heart of his ministry is a deep faith in Christ, who has called him to lead the people of Grand Island. This faith is reflected in his coat of arms, which contain the words, "Remain in me."
This is the answer to a lot of things. If we just remain as branches on the vine, we receive all that we need, and we bear much fruit. I said, that makes sense to me. Symbolically, it's beautiful too. I'll take it. Fact is that each of us is precious and unique and gifted and graced. Every single one of us is a never to be repeated wonder in all of God's creation. There'll never be another one of us, and God knew what he was doing when he created us, and we have to trust that. And then from there, God does the rest. Have faith in the one who created you. And I think we all have to do that. And my hope is that anyone who's watching this would be able to say, I need to believe more in the God who created me and stop comparing myself or envying somebody else, so that I can finally give back to God, what he invested in me, because God knows what he's doing. So it's an act of faith, really, in the one who creates us all.